Since buying my milling machine many months ago, I found myself struggling with accuracy. Many of the machining videos I watch have one thing in common, and that's a DRO. So I've headed over to eBay and purchased myself a 3-axis setup, and in this video, I'll share my journey of what it took to install it. The brand of DRO is the 2Auto 2/3 TTL linear glass scale encoder. I chose this brand as I'd seen it on other YouTube channels using this exact model. Choosing the length of scales was a simple process. The scales on eBay are listed as their working length, and you will need to allow for the end capping and alloy shield that adds up to around 140mm to the overall length. The lengths I chose for my mill were the 700mm, 250mm and the 150mm for the vertical axis. Each of the scales came with their own hardware kits that proved very helpful when it came to figuring out how to fit them to the mill. So this is everything that came with what I'd chosen on eBay. The assortment of hardware was quite impressive, and make sure you stick around to the end of the video as I'll explain what this setup cost to install. So this is my Hafco HM-32B mill that I've purchased here in Australia. I'm really not sure what it will take to install the DRO, but I'm hoping that it all goes smoothly and I end up with a whole lot more accuracy by the end of this video. The original plan was to install the X-axis scale on the rear side of the bed so that it was out of the way, but I soon found that the coolant drain tube would prevent this from being possible. Rather than attempt to relocate the drain tube, I decided to install the scale on the front side instead. Preparation for the scale was simple. There were a few bits of hardware that firstly needed to be removed so that the scale would sit flat against the bed face. Now as you can see, the scale ends overhang the length of the bed. These are the extra lengths that I mentioned earlier in the video. The installation process involved a lot of time staring at the brackets that were supplied and just wondering, how the hell am I going to make these fit? I switched over to the smaller scale to make planning the fitment a little more manageable, and it was at this point that I finally started to see how the supply bracket could be modified to suit my mill. Now that the bracket is a little smaller, I'll now be able to make both L brackets for the scale from this one bit of alloy. So at this point, I'm recreating the 6mm slot in the bracket so that there is adjustment when it comes time to bolting up the scale. So far, so good. I now need to mark the location for the holes that will allow me to bolt the scale to these brackets. Now that the scale is in place, it's now time to mount the reader. It should be a matter of drilling some holes and tapping 2 threads. The reader needs to be mounted in the center of the scale. Being that my scale is 700mm in length, it will need to be at the halfway point of 350mm. Clearance was a big issue when it came time to tapping these threads. I started with a socket, but once the load increased, it started slipping. My standard tap holder didn't fit, so I clamped the tap with vice grips and that did the trick. I'm not sure if you guys are like me, but I couldn't help myself. Rather than install all 3 scales, I felt I needed to reward myself with seeing the first scale do its thing on the screen. So let's install the bracket and mount the screen on the wall behind my mill. The kit didn't come with any instructions on how the holding arm was assembled, so after 10 minutes off camera, I finally figured out how it all went together. Now that I've rewarded myself with seeing some numbers move on the screen, it's time to tackle the Y-axis scale install. I do feel that this will be a little harder. The plan is to mount the scale on the left underside of the bed. Time to stare at the scale once again and figure out how it will be mounted. So after a quick trip to Bunnings, I returned with a plan. I purchased a 1 meter length of 50mm by 3mm alloy flat bar to help with the install. After eyeballing the flat bar in place, I needed to cut a notch to allow it to clear the handle mechanism. So after working out the placement of the mounting holes, I needed to quickly machine some slots to allow for adjustment. Off camera, I installed the flat bar and also made some shims that will pack the scale out a few millimeters to help align where the reader will end up mounting. I just cut down some of the supplied L brackets that came with the kit. To help with making sure that the scale was at the same angle as the bed, I just used the digital angle finder to match the two angles. Everything seems to be working correctly. Time to tackle the hardest scale of the set. I tried my best to plan ahead with how to do the Z-axis install, but it seems that there isn't anyone on the internet who's shown how they did it on my model of mill. So making this video, I truly hope that it will help guide some of you out there if you have a mill like mine. Inside the power box, there were two screws that helped me get the clearance that I needed to undo the upper plastic cover screw. To save you from seeing me drill and tap for the 10th time, I did it off camera. Basically, I've placed the flat bar in place and drilled and tapped threads where the mill has enough material for them to fit. Using the markings that I made on the paper, I transferred them onto the bracket and drilled the holes. The Z-axis is now functioning. Off camera, I needed to change the setting where when traveling down, the reading increased in its value. Time for the final touches. I now need to install the scale protective covers. To do so, I used the small screws that the kit came with and I tapped threads into the end caps of the scale. To install the final cover, I used two threads that were in the faceplate of the switch panel. To test out the accuracy of this setup, I had a delivery of a new tool that I also purchased off eBay. It's an electronic edge finder. I'm really keen to see how it performs. As a basic test, I thought I could use my 123 block. I know that these are machined to being exactly 75mm in length, so let's see how the new DRO goes with its reading. Just for reference, the ball tip on the digital edge finder is 10mm in diameter, so that is why the measured movement is just under 85mm. I halved the total movement to see if the edge finder will end up in the middle hole of the 123 block. It looked like it was very close, but I'm not even certain that these Temu 123 blocks are perfect themselves. All in all, I'm happy with the result. So here is one last look at the newly installed DRO on my Hafco mill. I really hope that you enjoyed the video and that maybe it will inspire you to install one on your mill. If you're feeling generous, hit that like button, share the video to your friends and subscribe for weekly videos. I appreciate everyone who has made it this far in the video, and until next time, I'll see you in the next one.